My father never once told me that he loved me, not in 59 years, and I had made my peace with believing that he never did. That is a hard thing to say out loud about your own father, especially now that he is gone and cannot defend himself. But I want to start with the truth, because the truth is what makes the rest of this story matter. My name is Gretchen. I am 59 years old, and I grew up in Flint, Michigan, the daughter of a man named Hank who worked 38 years on the line at the plant and came home every night smelling of metal and machine oil, ate his supper in about 9 minutes, and disappeared into the garage until bed. He was not a cruel man. I want to be fair to him. He never raised a hand to me, never drank, never gambled the paycheck away. He was something quieter, and to a little girl, somehow harder to bear than a cruel man would have been. He was absent while sitting right there. He was a closed door. He had a way of looking at you that made you feel you were taking up his time, and a way of going quiet that could fill a whole house. And I spent my entire childhood trying to earn a word from him and almost never getting one. My mother used to make excuses for him. "That is just how your father is," she would say. "He loves you in his own way. He just cannot show it." And as a child, I clung to that, his own way, like a life raft. But a child cannot live on a love she cannot see or hear or feel. A child needs the words, needs the hand on the shoulder, needs the eyes to light up when she walks into a room. I got none of that from my father, and after enough years of getting none of it, I stopped believing my mother's excuses and started believing the evidence of my own eyes, which told me, every single day, that I was a duty to that man and not a joy. And the thing that made it cut the deepest, the thing I carried like a stone in my shoe for half a century, was my brother. My brother Danny was 3 years older than me, and with Danny, my father was a different man. Not warm exactly. My father did not have warm in him, but present. The two of them would be out in that garage for hours, heads under the hood of some car, and I would hear it through the kitchen window, the low rumble of my father actually talking, actually laughing once in a while, teaching Danny the names of tools and the feel of an engine, and I would stand at the sink drying dishes with my mother and feel like a child with her nose pressed to the glass of a warm house she was not allowed into. I did not hate Danny for it. That is important to me to say. Danny was a good brother, and he did not ask to be the favorite. And when we were grown, he told me once, quietly, that being the one Dad poured everything into had its own weight, that he had spent his boyhood being shaped into a version of our father and had never been allowed to be anything softer. I did not understand him then. I was too busy envying him the thing I had wanted my whole life. It was only after Danny died, and then our father, that I understood we had each been starved at the same table, just of different things. Danny got the attention and not the tenderness. I got neither, and at least, I see now, I got the freedom to become wholly myself, 300 miles away. There are no winners in a house where the father cannot speak his heart. There are only different shapes of going hungry. I tried when I was young. Lord, how I tried. I would go out to the garage and offer to help, and he would say it was no place for me. Go on back inside. I asked him to teach me to fix things, and he would grunt and turn back to his work. So I stopped asking. By the time I was a teenager, I had decided that my father had room in his heart for exactly one child, and that child was my brother, and that I was the daughter, the afterthought, the one who got fed and clothed and driven to school, but never once got reached for. And I built my life around that belief, the way you build a house around a crooked beam, never quite straight, always a little wrong, for the rest of your days. I remember bringing home a report card in the 5th grade, all the highest marks, and I waited up past my bedtime to show him when he came off his shift, holding that card like a winning lottery ticket. He looked at it under the kitchen light, still in his work clothes, and he handed it back and said, "Do not let it go to your head," and walked to the bathroom to wash the plant off his hands. I went to my room, and I tore that report card into little pieces so I would never be stupid enough to hope like that again. I was 10 years old. I have thought about those torn pieces many times since, and I understand now that I was not tearing up a report card. I was tearing up the part of me that still believed I could win him. I moved away as soon as I could. I went to college 2 states over, the first in our family to go, and when I told my father I had gotten in, he nodded and said, "Well?" and went back to his newspaper. That was it. Well, I cried about that one syllable in my dorm room for a week. I married a good man named Tom. I raised 2 children. I built a life 300 miles from Flint, and I told myself it was because of the job, because of Tom's work, because of 100 practical things, when the truth was simpler and sadder. I left because there was nothing holding me there. My mother loved me, and I came back for her, but my father felt like a stranger I happened to share a holiday table with, and the older I got, the more I stopped expecting that to ever change. It is a strange grief, leaving a parent who is still alive. There is no funeral for it, no casserole, no one to sit with you. You just quietly relocate your heart somewhere safer, and you call on Sundays, and you let the years put miles between you that the highway never could. I told everyone my father and I were just not close. Said it lightly, the way you mention the weather, and I believed I had healed the wound by the simple trick of no longer pressing on it. I had not healed it. I had only learned to carry it so that it did not show. There is a difference, and it took a locked drawer to teach me what it was. My mother died 8 years ago, and after that, my visits to Flint got shorter and further apart. My father and I did not know how to be in a room together without her. We would sit at that same kitchen table, the two of us now, and the silence that had always lived in our house seemed to swell up and fill every corner. I would ask about his health. He would say he was fine. I would ask if he needed anything. He would say no. And I would drive the 300 miles home, feeling the same way I had felt at that kitchen sink as a girl, like a person standing outside a window, looking in at a warmth that was not meant for her. There is one visit I cannot stop thinking about now. About a year before he died, I drove up, and we sat in the silence as always. And as I was leaving, pulling my coat on at the door, he said, out of nowhere, "You still like to read." It was not even a question. It was just a thing he said, looking at the floor. "You still like to read," and I said, "Yes, Dad, I still read." And he nodded and said, "Good." And that was the whole of it. I drove home, turning it over. That odd little fragment, "You still like to read," and I could not make anything of it. Now I know exactly what it was. It was a man reaching across 50 years with the only tool he had. A memory of a little girl reading a book out loud, smart as a whip, and trying, in the only language he owned, to tell me that he had seen me once and never forgotten. I missed it. I missed it completely. It just sounded like more of his strangeness at the time. He died in the early spring, alone, the way I think he would have wanted it if anyone had ever asked him what he wanted, which no one ever did. A neighbor found him in the garage. His heart, the doctor said, quick and quiet. He was 84. Danny had passed 2 years before, cancer, far too young, and so it fell to me, the daughter, the afterthought, to come back to Flint one last time and take apart the house and the life of a man I was not sure had ever really let me in. I did the house first. It was easy in a way because there was so little of him in it. His clothes, his chair, the recliner with the dent worn into it, a drawer of bills paid on time for 60 years. It was the house of a man who did not accumulate, did not keep, did not hold on to things, and going through it, I felt the old familiar ache, the sense that my father had moved through this world, leaving as little trace of his heart as a man possibly could. I cried a little, going through the house, but I will be honest, it was a thin and dutiful kind of crying, the crying you do because a parent has died, and you are supposed to, not the crying that comes up from the floor of you. I did not yet have anything to cry the deep way about. I thought I was grieving a man I had never really had. I did not know I was about to meet him, properly, for the first time, 3 hours after his funeral, in a cold garage, through the things he left in a drawer. And then, on the last day, I made myself open the garage. I had been dreading it. The garage was his place, the place I had been turned away from my whole childhood, and walking into it as a grown woman, with the right to be there at last, felt like trespassing. It smelled exactly the way it had when I was 6: oil and sawdust and cold concrete, and something underneath that was just him. And the smell hit me so hard, I had to stand in the doorway a minute and breathe. I almost paid a company to come empty it, you know? I stood at that door with my phone in my hand, looking up junk hauling services, telling myself I did not need to go through a lifetime of a stranger's tools, that I could just have it all carted away and be done. Something stopped me. I would like to say it was love or intuition, but honestly, I think it was only the cheapness my father raised me with, the sense that you do not pay a man to do what you can do yourself. That stinginess saved my life, in a way. If I had made that call, the drawer would have gone to a landfill, the notebook with it, and I would have driven back to my life still believing my father never loved me, and I would have believed it until the day I died. I'd never been so grateful for a small and graceless impulse. It is a terrifying thing, how close I came to never knowing. Along the back wall was his workbench, a great heavy thing he had built himself, scarred and stained from decades of work, with a pegboard of tools above it, every tool in its painted outline, and a bank of drawers down one side. I figured I would find what you find in any man's workbench: screws and bolts in baby food jars, sandpaper, old spark plugs. I started at the top drawer, planning to be quick, to sort the junk from the sellable and be on the road home by dark. The top drawer was tools, as I expected. The second drawer was hardware, but the third drawer down, the deep one, was locked, and it took me 20 minutes of searching before I found the little key taped to the underside of the bench, the way a man hides a thing he means to keep but cannot quite say why. I worked the key into the lock, and I slid open that heavy drawer, and what was inside stopped my heart. It was full of me, not tools, not hardware, me. The whole drawer, packed careful and deliberate, was full of my childhood. The parts of it I had handed to my father over the years and assumed he had thrown away. On top was a card, a Father's Day card, made of red construction paper gone soft and pale with age, a child's crayon drawing of a stick man with a wrench, and inside, in the careful, wobbling letters of a first grader, "To Daddy, I love you, from Gretchen." I had made that card. I had no memory of making it, but I knew my own child's hand, and I knew, with a jolt that went through me like cold water, that my father had kept it for more than 50 years, in a locked drawer, where he could not even see it without unlocking it. Underneath the card was more. So much more. A lopsided clay pinch pot I had made him in the second grade, painted a terrible green, the kind of thing a father is supposed to admire for a day and quietly throw away. He had kept it for 52 years. A keychain I had woven out of plastic lanyard at summer camp. A tie, a child's clip-on tie, that I had painted with fabric markers for some long-forgotten birthday. The paint cracked now, but the color's still there. Every clumsy, worthless, priceless little thing I had ever made and handed to my silent father, hoping for a smile I rarely got, he had taken into that garage and locked away and kept, every single one, for half a century. I sank down onto the cold floor of that garage with a 50-year-old construction paper card in my shaking hands, and I started to cry in a way I had not cried since my mother's funeral, because I understood, all at once, that I had been wrong. Not a little wrong. Wrong about the whole shape of my life. Wrong about the one thing I had been most sure of. Because here is the thing I had never let myself consider in 59 years. A cold man. A man who does not love his daughter, does not keep her things. He does not save a second grader's ugly green clay pot for 52 years. He does not lock a construction paper card in a drawer and tape the key to the underside of his workbench. Indifference throws things away. It was love that kept them, love so private and so guarded that it hid itself even from me, especially from me, the one it was about. The evidence of my whole childhood had been exactly backward. The proof was not in what he failed to say. The proof was in this drawer, where he had been quietly keeping me, all along. But the drawer was not done with me yet. Underneath the keepsakes, at the very bottom, was a notebook. A cheap spiral notebook, the cover soft and curled, And when I opened it, I found my father's handwriting, which I had seen perhaps a dozen times in my life, page after page of it. And I sat there on that floor and read it, and it took apart and rebuilt everything I thought I knew about the man. It was a record of me. In his cramped, careful, unpracticed hand, my father had been keeping track of my life. The first entry was from when I was small. Gretchen read a whole book out loud tonight, did not miss a word. Smart as a whip, smarter than her old man. He had written that. The man who said well when I got into college had written, when I was 6, that I was smarter than him, and had hidden it in a notebook in a locked drawer where I would never see it. I sat there trying to square it with the man I had known, the man who said well when I got into college, the man who handed back my perfect report card and told me not to let it go to my head. That man and the man who wrote smarter than her old man in a secret notebook were the same person, and the distance between them, between what my father felt and what my father could say, was the whole tragedy of his life and a good part of the tragedy of mine. He felt everything. He could say almost none of it. And so the people who loved him spent their lives standing in front of a locked house, knocking, certain no one was home, when all the while he was inside, pressed against the door, unable to find the knob. There were dozens of entries spanning decades. Gretchen made the honor roll. The principal sent a letter. I read that one twice, because I had never known he saw that letter. He had never said a word. Drove to Lansing today, sat in the back of the auditorium, watched Gretchen get her diploma, left before she saw me. Did not want to make a fuss of myself. She looked so proud up there. He had been there. At my college graduation, the one I was certain he had skipped because he did not care. He had driven 2 states over, sat in the back, watched his daughter, and slipped away before I could see him, and then come home and written it down in secret, because that, God help him, was the only place my father knew how to say what he felt. I have to tell you what it did to me to see my father's handwriting going on for pages, because in my whole life I had never known my father to write anything longer than a check. This was a man who communicated in grunts and single syllables, who I would have sworn did not have a paragraph in him. And here were pages, years of them, the cramped letters pressed hard into the paper as though writing were physical labor for him, which I suppose it was. Every word in that notebook had cost him something. He was a man hauling his own heart up out of a deep well, one bucket at a time, in a language he had never been taught to speak, and he did it over and over for decades, for an audience of no one, for me. I read every page on that cold floor as the afternoon light moved across the workbench. He had written down the births of both my children, with the dates and notes. A boy for Gretchen, healthy, 8 pounds. I held him at the hospital, did not know what to say to her, never do. But he is a fine boy. He had been at the hospital. I remembered him there, standing awkward in the corner, leaving early, and I had read it as indifference. And here in his own hand was the truth, that he held my son and did not know what to say to me, because he never did, because the words had been beaten out of him somewhere long before I was born, and he had spent his whole life unable to get them back. What struck me, reading them in order, was how he never once wrote down a single complaint. Not about the work that wore his body out, not about the money that was always tight, not about my mother, not about me leaving, not about Danny's cancer, not about being left alone at the end of his life. A man could have filled a notebook with grievances and been entitled to every word. My father filled his with us, with the small, bright moments of his children's lives that he had witnessed in silence and could not, would not, let pass unrecorded. It was the most loving document I have ever held, and the saddest, because every tender thing in it was something he could have simply said to my face on any one of 10,000 days, and never did, and now never could. And there was an entry, near the end, that explained the thing I had held against him the longest. It read, Gretchen wanted me to teach her the cars when she was little. Wish to God I had. Kept her out of the garage, because my own father lost 2 fingers in here, and I could not stand the thought of her getting hurt. This is no place for a girl, I told her, and I saw how it stung her, every time, and I never knew how to take it back. Danny was different, Danny was rough like me, but Gretchen was fine and bright, and I was afraid of this place for her. I think she believes I did not want her. I have never known how to tell her it was the opposite, that I wanted her safe more than I wanted her near. I read that entry on the floor, and I had to set the notebook down because my hands were shaking too hard to hold it. 50 years of believing this is no place for a girl meant he did not want me, and it had meant the opposite the entire time. His own father, my grandfather, had lost 2 fingers to a saw in that very kind of garage. My father had grown up watching a man bleed in a workshop, and when his bright little daughter came to the door wanting in, all he could see was danger, and the only way his frightened, wordless heart knew to keep me safe was to keep me out, and to watch it wound me, year after year, and to grieve it in a notebook, and to never, ever find the words to explain. We lost 50 years to a sentence I heard one way, and he meant another. 50 years. 50 years. For 50 years I had believed my father kept me out of that garage because he did not want me, and the truth, sitting right there in his own clumsy hand, was that he kept me out because he could not bear the thought of me being hurt in the place that had maimed his own father. The thing I had read as rejection had been terror. The thing I had read as coldness had been a love so frightened and so inarticulate that it could only protect me by pushing me away, and then grieve, in a locked drawer, that the pushing had cost him his daughter. There was one more thing in that garage, and I did not find it until I stood up, wrung out and emptied, and turned around. In the corner, under a clean drop cloth, was a rocking chair. Half finished, the wood sanded smooth as skin, the joints fitted by hand, a beautiful thing, the kind of thing that takes a real craftsman months of evenings. And pinned to the drop cloth was a note in his handwriting, for Gretchen's grandbaby, coming in the fall. Get it done by September. I pulled back that drop cloth and saw the chair and my knees nearly went again, because a workbench full of old keepsakes is a man remembering the past, and that is a tender thing, but a half-built rocking chair for a baby not yet born is a man reaching for a future, my future, the future of my line, and choosing to spend the last evenings of his life on it. He was 84, and his hands surely ached, and he went out to that cold garage night after night and shaped that wood for a child he knew, I think, he might not live to meet. That is not a cold man. That was never a cold man. That was the warmest man I have ever known, locked the whole time inside, a silence he could not break. My daughter was pregnant. My first grandchild, my father's first great-grandchild, was due that September. I had told my father on the phone a few months before he died, and he had said, on the phone, in that flat voice, "That's good," and changed the subject. And I had hung up thinking he did not care about that either. And then he had walked out to this garage and started building a rocking chair by hand for a baby he would never live to meet, racing a clock he did not know was about to run out, because building things was the only way the man had ever learned to say, "I love you, I am happy, I am proud, you matter to me." He did not get it done by September. He died in the spring with the chair half made, and I think about that unfinished chair more than almost anything because it is the truest picture of my father I have. A man loving his family with his hands, in silence, in a cold garage, running out of time, never once able to come inside and simply say the words out loud. There is a particular cruelty in the timing that I have had to make my peace with. He was 84. He had been silent and shut for the whole of my life, and the year he finally began, in his own way, to reach toward the future, toward a great-grandchild, toward me through that child, was the year his heart gave out. I will never know whether, had he lived, that chair might have been the thing that finally cracked the door open between us, whether he might have called me to come see it, whether we might have stood in that garage together at last, a father and his daughter, and said without saying it everything we had missed. I like to believe we might have. I have to believe it. It is the one piece of him I get to invent, and so I invent it kindly. I finished the chair. I want you to know that. I'm not a carpenter, but Tom and I found a man in town, a furniture maker, and I brought him my father's half-built chair and his tools, and I asked him to teach me to finish it myself, the way my father never would. It took me all summer. I sanded and fitted, and I learned, at 59, the things my father was too frightened to teach me at 9. And with every evening I spent on that chair, I felt closer to him than I had in all the years he was alive. My grandson was born in September. He has been rocked to sleep every night of his life, in a chair his great-grandfather started and his grandmother finished, and one day I will tell him that the chair is what love looks like in our family. Quiet. Made by hand. A little unfinished. But real, so much more real than I ever knew. I brought the finished chair to my daughter's house the week before the baby came, and when she saw it, she ran her hand along the smooth arm of it and asked me where I had learned to do such work, and I told her. I told her about her great-grandfather, the silent man she barely remembered, and the locked drawer, and the half-built chair under the drop cloth, and the note that said, "Get it done by September." My daughter cried. She had grown up hearing me speak of my father as a cold and distant man, because that is who I believed he was, and I had to sit in her kitchen and gently take that story back and give her a truer one, a harder and more beautiful one, about a man who loved in a language no one in his life had ever learned to read. I keep the notebook on my nightstand now. On the nights I miss my mother, or I am angry at the years my father and I lost to a silence neither of us knew how to break, I open it and I read his cramped, careful hand, telling me, decades too late, the things I spent my whole childhood aching to hear. Smart as a whip, so proud up there. I wanted her safe more than I wanted her near. He loved me. He loved me the entire time. He just kept it where I could not find it, the way he kept everything that mattered to him, locked in a drawer in a cold garage, hidden even from himself. Tom asked me, gently, a few months after, whether reading it over and over was good for me, whether I was not just picking at a wound. And I tried to explain to him that it is the opposite. For 59 years, I lived with a hole in me in the exact shape of my father's love. A hole I had decided was simply empty. Simply the place where a father's love was supposed to be and was not. The notebook did not deepen that hole. It filled it. Late, far too late, but it filled it. I would rather have a father I misunderstood for 59 years than the cold father I thought I had, even if the understanding came 3 hours after I buried him. The grief is real. But underneath the grief, for the first time in my life, is something I never had before. The plain knowledge that I was loved by my father. That is worth reading for every night for the rest of my life. So if you grew up the way I did, with a parent who never said the words, who felt like a closed door, who saved their warmth for someone else, or seemed to have no warmth at all, I want to offer you the thing my father's workbench gave me, even though I got it too late to give it back to him. Some people are not cold. They are locked. They were raised by people who taught them that a man does not say such things, that love is weakness, that the only safe way to carry your heart is to bury it where no one can use it against you. And so they love you the only way they know how, by fixing your car, by keeping your drawings, by driving 2 states over and sitting in the back so you will not see them cry at your graduation, by building you something with their hands because their mouth was broken in childhood and never healed. It is not the love you wanted. It may not be a love you could even feel while it was happening, but it is love, and it is often enormous, and it is often hidden in a drawer you will not find until they are gone. If that parent is still living, I'm asking you, go and look for the drawer now, while there is still time. Go out to the garage. Ask the question. Sit in the silence a little longer than is comfortable. You may not get the words even then. Some doors never do open. But you may get a chance I will never have. The chance to say, I know, Dad. I know now. I always was loved. Do not wait, as I waited, for a locked drawer to tell you what a living man could not. Thank you for sitting with me tonight. If this story found a tender place in you, go call the quiet one in your family, or just sit a while with the memory of them, and come back and sit with me again soon.